I would like to welcome our panelists and welcome our host. And I'd like to introduce our host today. It's Heather Felix, who is the program director of UCLA Anderson's Easton Technology Management Center and a board member of the executive board of Innovate at UCLA. So with that, Heather, please take it away.
Thank you, Jim. So we've got two really amazing speakers for you today in conversation about, some really important topics in terms of really how companies can seriously shift their cultures to, be inclusive and diverse and, what that can actually do for the benefit of the company. We've got Dr. Al Osborne, who's a Senior Associate Dean and Professor of Global Economics, Management, and Entrepreneurship at UCLA's Graduate School of Business. He's also the Faculty Director of the Price Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Al has served on numerous corporate boards and nonprofit boards and brings just, a wealth of knowledge and experience in this area. Nicole McMackin is CEO and president of the Irvine Technology Corporation, ITC. ITC is a national technology, staffing, and solutions company serving mid-sized Fortune 500 companies and clients throughout the United States. She's also a leader in promoting women in technology and has actually developed a curriculum to educate female technology executives to become CIOs. And UCLA hosted that program a while ago, and it was really amazing. And so we're happy to have Nicole. So just a few timekeeping. This is going to be an hour. I recommend that everyone have themselves on mute. I'm going to do the same because I'm hearing a gardener. I apologize. I recommend you put it in speaker view so you can see Al and Nicole. And we're going to have audience Q&A. If people could just do the hand raise function, I'll keep an eye out for that, and we'll dedicate, the last 10 minutes or so of the talk to the audience questions.
Well, I guess that's a cue for us to get started.
All right, Al.
Well, listen, Nicole, terrific to be able to cooperate with you. And so I will start by asking you some questions which you may be able to answer specifically because of your expertise. So as we know, we're trying to deal with the whole question of how leaders in an organization can play a critical role in doing something about issues of inclusion in an equitable way. Workplaces all over are struggling with this issue. And so I thought that you may be able to lay the groundwork of what is it that leaders can do and how can leadership create relevant strategies and what's the data like for those who have attempted the kind of initiatives that might be necessary in this brave new world.
Yeah, thanks, Al. I'm happy to share any knowledge that I have and expertise in this field. As Heather had mentioned, I founded an organization where really focused on women in technology and elevating their careers. And within my organization, this is kind of the topics that we do. We find diverse candidates for organizations, as well as help organizations align their goals and strategy around DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. And so I'm happy to share, kind of the things that we do when we go in and advice that we lend CEOs. And I wanted to start really quick with just some facts, and it'll kind of set the tone, I think, for our discussion and some of the questions, Al, that you may have. So in 2018, McKinsey and Company, they did a study around organizations that had more racial, ethnic, and gender diversity, and found that those organizations themselves were 35% more likely to have higher returns above the industry average, which is which is super interesting. Similarly, on an IT side, and I don't know how many of you are just on the technology of things, there was another study done by Intel and Dalberg Global, and the study is called Decoding Diversity in Technology, and it really focused on gender diversity, equity, and inclusion of all underrepresented minorities. And it was kind of interesting, just on the tech sector, they found that for those organizations that truly move the needle in these sectors, it added nationally 470 to, I think it was $570 billion to our industry. And then from the GDP level, it added they estimated 1.2 to 1.6% to our country's GDP, which I thought was really interesting. I was giving a lecture pre-COVID to a group of CIOs, and you know, we were talking about the subject of diversity and inclusion within organizations and how important it is. And you know, and during the conversation, I said, you know, you may not believe in this personally, and it might be a bunch of mumbo jumbo, for lack of better words. I said, but you know, your shareholders, your stockholders are the ones that look at this, and there's now metrics left and right. I think we all see it and we all hear about it, and you're pulling different metrics from here and there, but it leads to a better return on investment. And I said, so if you don't care, I said, at the very minimum, your shareholders do. And, you know, and it's not only a good thing for equity across all organizations for a variety of things, which Al, we're going to get and we're going to talk a lot about today, but from a fiscal component for your organizations, you know, they outperform, you know, other like organizations that lack diversity. And
you know, Nicole, you're absolutely right by starting out with letting folks know that, hey, good practices pay off and the owners of the enterprise win economically. So let's get on with how we can create organizations that value these activities so that, in fact, our shareholders can have a higher rate of return. It seems to me that ought to be language that leaders would understand.
Yeah.
So what can we tell leaders along these lines?
So I think where we can start is from a high level, is that it starts with a mindset and a culture from the top. I'm talking about from the board level and from the CEO level. And that's where it's going to then trickle down. It's interesting, I found in various studies that I've done that CEOs can put together things and talk a great talk. But when you look at numbers, right, you look at 88% of, you know, CEOs come up with a thoughtful version and vision of, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion for their organizations. But when you drill down, only 24% of them organizational wide have metrics tied to DEI, right? That's telling a little bit. And only 39% require their direct reports to report on DEI. And so that's even more telling about where from the top, leading from the top, if you're going to roll out something, just like any business objective, how are we going to measure it? What I tell all organizations that are serious about putting this together is this is a business strategy. This is not an HR plan. This has to reside from the top with the individuals who set the tone for the company. So I guess to answer your question, Al, first thing is it has to be a culture of doing. It can't be a culture of speaking because it doesn't work. You can look at it throughout organizations and their fall off rates. So with that, you're asking, what could we do? So now if you have a board and you have a CEO who are committed to doing this, when we go into I go into organizations and I speak, I say the first thing that you need to do is set up a diversity council that represents the entire company at all levels, right? And create a business objective with dates and measurable expectations. And so often, you know, companies will say, well, how do we start? What do we do to do that? And the first step is assessing your current state, right? What do you have right now from a diverse perspective? And where do you want to be? And oftentimes I'll get, well, I don't know, where should I be? And that's really from a culture perspective and a business perspective, where you want to be. And so companies are very satisfied with very different metrics. So number one, coming down from the board and the CEO, pulling together a council on diversity. There needs to be metrics set up around those objectives, doing a current state, where that is. And then, you know, where I see a lot of diversity is not at the manager level and above. I think most organizations don't see that. We see a lot of diversity within all our organizations at kind of the worker level, the worker bee level, right? But if you're looking at CEOs, you're looking at vice presidents, directors, managers, you don't see quite a bit as those. And I would say when you're setting up your diversity council, that there needs to be representation all throughout that, or that for that group, as well as a real focus on having first frontline managers be qualified and be integrated within that management level.
Nicole, let me ask you a couple of questions, because first of all, this is hard work.
Yes.
And while we know there are the economic benefits, and while we know that CEOs can put together their council, the real question is the council empowered, or are elements in the council at the level in which the cultural change or the diversity and inclusion has to take place, feel that they can actually do it? And so maybe one of the problems we sometimes have in organizations is that they say they want to do diversity and inclusion at whatever step they might be, but they really aren't willing to do it at the levels where it makes works. And employees themselves may say, well, management they really aren't giving the right signals. So how do you deal with the notion of, you talked about measurement, but making goals in diversity and inclusion, just like we have other strategic goals, sticky in the sense that people take them seriously and that they're aligned? I see that as a difficult thing. Can you help out people who are facing that problem?
Al, you're 100% right. So what this is something that is not easy. It is not easy, but it is more than doable. And, you know, you need to have your senior leadership team on board with this. You need to have your human resources on board with this. You need to put in place, corporations do, measurable metrics that are actually, in my opinion, and what I've seen work, tied to bonuses.
Incentives.
Yes, tied to company goals. There's nothing more motivating to people than money. And to be able to really pull this through and pull it through properly, it needs to be measured, just like we measure everything in our business, right? Why are we not measuring our people? Why are we committing, as I mentioned, you know, 88% of CIOs create a thoughtful vision, right? But where does that go? How come only 24% of them tie that vision to DEI? And so if you're really committed, those are some of the things that you have to do as an organization to get it going. And there's a slew of things, of course, you know, from, you know, putting together with human resources, training and implementation, right? I think the biggest fallacy is, and we can get into this, I mean, because I think this is really, really an important part of this discussion is people who interview people for positions and who really are missing the mark because they have the like me syndrome, right? I want to hire someone like me.
Yeah.
And I think that's challenging. But to answer your question, how do you do it? You've got to put some metrics, some measures, and some money on the line. And that's how people will fall in line. And I think people, you know, you kind of have these sacred cows of the organization at these strong leadership, you know, levels. And the first thing that you're going to see is that will disseminate the whole DEI and project and program is that a person looks at their senior leader and says, they're not doing it.
Exactly. So, you know, you make a good point here, and I'm going to, if I can give me a little poetic lines, they need to model it. I mean, if the senior guys don't walk the talk, then it is just so much blah, blah. And although it may show up in their incentives changing, they actually do have to have a presence, if you will, so that people can see, well, you know, looks like the executive vice president is serious about this because he has asked that we have a pipeline of people that are, let's just say, diverse.
Yes.
Because an organization, you know, as much as you or I may like people that are like us, too many of us in an organization is not effective. We really do need diversity.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of diversity, from what you're saying, if I might suggest it to people who are listening, a lot of diversity sometimes comes in different packages. It comes in different ethnicities. It comes with different races. And that's the kind of problem because people have different life experiences. And it is those experiences that can create the opportunity for value. So I got to ask you another question, Nicole, along these lines. How do you develop a pipeline? How do you find these diverse candidates that are going to be necessary for you to be able to create the value?
So it's funny, that's the number one question I get asked, the number one question all the time.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, organizations are looking for me to say, oh, they're all out here and this is exactly what you're doing to do and to create this diverse culture. And again, it's not that easy. But what I do say is that you need to start modeling the behavior at the senior leadership level. And I guess if we want to get into nuts and bolts of things, right? I look at it and I would say, for every interview, and it's mandated, for every high level interview that you're conducting, typically I see, obviously this is my business in recruiting, right? I see many oftentimes managers say, oh, somebody referred me, a good friend, and you know, we're gonna get along, and it's the like me syndrome, right? And there's no real desire there, number one, for that manager to have a level playing field and ask qualified questions that level everybody out. Oftentimes, and I'll bet everyone on this call has done this, when you're conducting an interview and you get along with someone. Maybe Al, you and I, you know, we like to play golf, let's say, and we have a commonality, and we get along and we start talking about golf. And as soon as you know it, I've skipped on some of the major questions that I need to find out from you because I really like you personally, and I could see you on my team. I could see that we have a, you know, workable relationship, and I hire you. And then what happens? The fail ratio of managers is so high in carrying through on the candidate side that we need to go back and re-interview. And so HR needs to have a very streamlined process in guidelines and mentorship on how you interview and how you interview across the board. So I advise, if you are hiring for a position, you have 3 at minimum qualified candidates at minimum. One of those candidates must be a diverse candidate. One of them must be. And you know what's funny? is that 95% of the time, when we put a diverse candidate in front of a manager, they end up, that's qualified, equally qualified, they end up hiring that diverse candidate.
Well, that's, that's an important fact, because people, I would think, don't really understand that in fact, that the higher rate for diverse candidates, when you find them, is very, very, 95%, my goodness.
Well, and I think, Al, it's interesting, and, many people may on this call be thinking, well, there's not a lot of diverse candidates out there in my arena. And I always combat it. And I said, we deal with a lot of diverse candidates in different areas. Maybe there's fewer in, say, technology perhaps than not, but the candidates, there are candidates out there, but what they're attracted to, I could speak as a woman to this. Davida, you've heard me say these things often, but the first thing I do if I'm looking for an opportunity is I look for the culture. I look for what's posted. I go on their website. Is it all white men and there's no women at the leadership level? I don't necessarily know if I want to go to an organization like that. There's unique things with how we tend to write job descriptions that rule certain diverse candidates out, certainly women, right? And there's the way that we interview and the processes, and that all needs to be strung along, and that all needs to have coaching and just awareness, right? I think sometimes even the human resources people in some of these organizations, that although their intentions are very, very strong and well, it's a constant alignment. It's a constant education on how did these interviews go and how are we measuring the candidates, and really comparing notes and creating a focus around it. And it's hard work, and but I think what you will see is by doing these things is that you have not only a more diverse culture, but I would say a stronger culture that brings a lot of different thoughts and ideas versus a non-diverse culture.
Well, you're absolutely right. And you made me, while you were talking, you made me think about the Rooney Rule in football, where the owner Rooney, I believe he was I get this right, but of the Pittsburgh football team, the Steelers, and he insisted that when you hired a coach, that they had to have an African American coach as part of the pool. So basically what you're doing is saying, I'm going to apply the Rooney Rule to corporate America and really help them understand what they need to do. And as a result, if we look at professional sports like football, we have a lot of African American coaches when we didn't have them before the Rooney Rule. And guess what? Some of them win and some of them lose. But the point is, you create the opportunity we're all looking for in promoting and bringing about a diverse and inclusive workplace. And so the football example just popped into my head while you were talking.
Al, you're spot on. And, I think, I look at, I think what California has done, I don't necessarily agree with California on a lot of things, but what some of the things that they've done, I think in regards to diversity at the board level for corporate boards and creating that, what they're trying to do with intent is, create and assimilate, minorities into the workforce. And I think it's been powerful. And Al, you and I spoke before about some of the board work that you've done and
Yes.
How impactful that has been. And I'd love to hear, from your end too, from a board perspective, the things that you've seen, and then corporations, what some of their objectives around DEI.
Well, I want to show you off today. So, and because you're out there doing it, and And
We're
while I'm
doing it together. We're doing it together.
well, I can, but you are right. I mean, there's some basic principle is people have the will to do things and exercise their power. They can have their social power. They can have influence, and somebody needs to speak up in the boardroom, which is what I found. And some of my experience has been with diversifying boards, and the way I think about it is I want different points of view. I don't want anybody in the boardroom like me. Good or bad, I don't think it extends what we're trying to do. And so you need to make a conscious effort, much like the Rooney Rule, and much like, but you need advice because it's not easy. And sometimes people need a third party. And I think that's where you and your organization have a lot of influence. You need a third party that is willing to say, wait a minute, we need to think this way. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, and let's think more this way. Oh, is that right? So you make it easy for someone who is uncomfortable to get to a place where they're comfortable in recognizing that, hey, inclusion works. And if they have a win, then it's like, then you get to really say, wow. And then they get to say this works. And then, of course, then it trickles down to the rest of the organization. And then you can see it in how they do talent. But it does start with the leadership. But there's a bottom-up effect here,
Yes, without a doubt.
That's important here. And so I find, we can all be pretty smart and know what we want in terms of capabilities and skills. But there's also a soft side to the organization. And some folks talk about IQ and EQ, and relationships among people sometimes have that connection that's necessary, that's supportive of a policy that's uncomfortable. And so we're going to reward people tangentially with financial benefits and so on if they do what they do like we say. But then we also let folks know that we're a team, that the organization doesn't work just by one person or another. And so we need these complementary skills. Well, I've talked too much along that line, but that is what I've seen as an essential. People begin to believe that we're all in the boat together, and we win or lose with our objective together. It is not that any one of us individually can have effect, but together, it's the 1 + 1 = 3 type of thing that I've found in my experience. But you got to stay with it.
Yeah, and I think that organizations that we've found, right, people, have these unconscious biases.
Yes.
And, how do you break those down? And it's by repetitive motion. It's by seeing things in front of you. So an example would be, you walk into an office and you don't, on recognitions, awards, and photos of the staff, photos of customers, photos, none of them look like you, right? None of them look like you. And that, what that does is it cements to others that you're different, and it makes
you don't belong.
You don't belong. And
yeah.
And you know what? You feel that.
Yeah.
So what we recommend, and it's just, small things within organizations that make a huge impact and huge difference. And I know they sound silly, but by posting and putting up pictures of your customers, of diversity in your corporation, all throughout the office, and recognizing them, people, as they're walking by, people are more heavily influenced about what they see, right? If they're seeing something, they become more acclimated quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so the recommendation is you're putting photos, you're putting things out that's going to help combat those biases, right? And within your organization, everything needs to be measured and monitored, right? Is from your resumes to your interviews to your onboarding to a mentoring program. Yes, we need a mentoring program. Your performance evaluations, how they're written and how they're identified, how you identify high performers. Are you tracking the level of promotions within diverse candidates? Why are some tracking or some not?
And why are some leaving?
Why are some leaving? And I think, you know, like with women, it's like this statistic, it makes me crazy. But you know, they're saying, you know, women, you know, there's random statistics, but like 50% of men say, oh no, there's plenty of women around, but there are, but they're not at the level that you need. Oh, women are leaving the organizations. They're not leaving, they're just not getting promoted. Right? Or there's a cause for that. And that's what the program Davida and I put together. We're trying to address that cause and move women forward. It's not anyone's fault but our own, right? Is what it boils down to. But those type of things to break down these unconscious biases, right? Within a corporation, they all are important and they all help.
You know, as you think about microaggressions, and it occurs to me that an organization, say, populated by only men, and typically we're talking about at the senior level white men, what kind of microaggressions have you seen that you can comfortably talk about that might be where you start, you know, as I think about.
So, should I tell the story?
Go ahead and tell the story.
That one story, do you remember I told you? Why and how. It'll be short, but this is a microaggression, and that happened to me. That is the reason that I started and founded this program. So it was a publicly traded finance company. They hired my company to come in and set up some IT stuff. Through it, they saw that I had a lot of different board experience, and so they were having a challenge with IT and the business, which is not uncommon, communicating effectively. So they asked me to come in and put together what would later be called an executive steering committee meeting on a monthly basis. So I went in and I had met with the CEO and many times and the president of the company. And so we got together with the business leaders. And again, it's a finance company. And so we had this huge boardroom. We walked in. I was the only woman. Fine. I'm used to that. No problem. And so I got up and it was about an hour and 25 minutes. I did my spiel. I went through, we got everything sorted. And at the very end of the meeting, two gentlemen had come up to me and they had said, Nicole, they said, that was really, really good. They said, gosh, we were not expecting that. And I looked at them and I smiled and I said, well, gosh, I said, I don't know if I should thank you or be offended. Right. And they said, oh, no, that's not what we meant. I said, no, that's exactly what it was. I said, but that's okay. I said, we're going to be good friends. I said, and you know what? I said, one day, I said, a blonde woman is going to walk in your boardroom. I said, and you're not going to ever have to come up and say, we weren't expecting that. We became great friends. Yeah. That day when I left that office, that I went and I told my husband and I told a dear friend, and I spent the next 4 months doing research around why is that, and what can I do to make a difference for women, so that and I wasn't heartbroken or anything of the sort, but it was more of I'm a curious person. But to your point, Al, to me that's a little bit of a microaggression. Sure. We weren't expecting that. Mm-hmm. You did a really good job. Well, you know, the first one to know I'm in the IT industry, and you know, I have blonde hair. Maybe it doesn't fit, and I'm a woman.
Yep. You know, and it's just like an innocent thing, but these guys really didn't know that they were doing it, because I don't think they were like anti-woman. I just think they didn't understand that there's some systemic behaviors that they have picked up, and breaking them down is hard. And so they do things subconsciously that they've been doing for many, many years. and until it is pointed out. And so I guess I would also say you pointed it out in a way that made them comfortable. If you
Yes.
think about your situation,
Yes.
so that they could actually then, in a real sense, free their minds to be receptive to change.
Yes.
And maybe being
and I
conscious
believe
of
that's
it.
the only way to do it.
Right. So you brought
I
what was
strongly believe
unconscious
that.
to their consciousness, and you are right. They will never tell. Whenever they see someone who looks like you again, they're going to remember that they had this learning. But of course, it's difficult to sustain these kinds of learnings with the myriad of microaggressions that are built in to our organizations. Now, we can't solve that problem today because it goes a lot deeper, but I thought I wanted your example because it's important in an organization to build things like empathy, try to understand where someone else is coming from as you try to educate them. And that requires some respect in the culture. And many cultures just don't respect employees at all levels in a way that allows the listening, because that's what we're talking about, and the re-listening to take place so that we can in fact move to a more inclusive environment. So that's really a really good point for all of us to remember. I'd like to kind of move to some other initiatives that your organization might specifically do to help people really buy into inclusion and diversity. So can you share us a little bit about some of what that might be?
Yeah, sure. You know, and I don't want this to be about my company by any means. I just want it to be about some nuggets that you all can take and think about and potentially, you know, have interest in and bring it back to your organizations. And so, I mean, and much of the things I think we've covered, making sure, you know, that you have the mindset, you have the drive, that you, that most importantly, that it's a business strategy. It's not an HR strategy.
Okay.
That it needs to be measured, that, I mean, there's a whole slew of training and assessments that need to go on within the organization, that you need to create a baseline, and then you need to understand where you want to be and what's normal, right? What's normal for that. You know, on the current state, I think, you know, if people ask me, you know, what's the one thing that has changed organizations, is that frontline manager on the interview process, that you must have a diverse candidate. And if you just do 3, all things being equal, I guarantee it, you are going to be able to fulfill your initiatives there. And it's not because of a have to, as much as a want to.
I want to you. So that's making that, well, I'm not doing because the rule says we have to have 3 women on the board, or in California, we need to be sure that, you know, we add a underrepresented minority next year. I mean, there are rules, but it'd be great if people came to things without having those kinds of rules, because they see it's in their self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm in a university, as you know, so, you know, I'm in a business school. You know, what can we do? Because it is our students that are going out to populate businesses at these, hopefully at these higher levels. Is there, what role can we play in say, being a partner in some of what you and others like you are doing to improve EDI in our enterprises?
I think that the universities play a huge role. I sat on the board for a while. My alma mater is UC Irvine, and I met with a lot of the deans. I sat on the chancellor's board there. And what I would love to see more of is corporations diverse executives coming into the classroom and talking about diversity within their organization, and what opportunities are out there and how to get them, and more partnerships with organizations. Like UCLA with Innovate has done a great job, with me partnering to foster women within their careers. Now, at UCI, I broached this topic many times around, bringing executives in to share a little bit more about, kind of outside of the university system, real world kind of aspects, so we can help prepare our students. And it was a hard battle, one which I lost, unfortunately. But I believe at the university level, you're really the only institution that doesn't track your assets, right? Every company tracks it, and you track it from an alumni perspective, but you're not tracking it from where are our students ending up and where are they going? Are they okay after they leave? And I think, and I'll have an exact answer on how this could be done. I think there should be more partnerships with your local companies. And I'm talking about deep partnerships. I'm not talking about people sending money and doing kind of stuff and sponsoring a little this or that. I'm talking about real concrete internship programs for these candidates. Assimilating them into our organizations. We talk about great ways to get diversity. How about, at the bottoms up level, getting some of these bright, Rafi, you were just talking to me before the call, bright candidates, and let's start getting them internships and jobs within the organization, getting them acclimated immediately. So there's a lot. I have a lot of opinions on the university part of it. But I feel like we're missing the boat here on some of this stuff, and there's so much more that we could be doing from a corporate and education system combined. And it starts even before that, right? It starts even before the
it
starts at all.
Well, you are right. Let me. This may be a little bit off the line, but it's related. Let me ask you a question about the whole issue of modeling and the timing of this in university, and how we can in fact really involve companies that we work with, and more than just them financially supporting, say, a program or something like that. I think what I hear you saying is you need their time. You need them their talent and experience to be part of the classroom, and they need to have conversations much like you would in the organizations that you're helping, to make students aware and maybe try to help them to start changing earlier their behavior, so that they will be receptive and will be thinking about these issues, just like they think about return on investment for a project that might yield to producing a new product line. Think about this as something that's an important part that they have to invest in to develop. So
I agree.
That's what I hear you saying.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And I believe it should even be at the high school level. I don't necessarily I think it needs to start earlier. And and there needs to be some sincere mentorship programs. I think corporations need to become much more involved in quid pro quo. I think the university system needs to start looking at this and tracking their students better, right? And seeing, if we really together as a community want to build and foster a diverse community, and the universities have that, they have those diverse candidates. It's like, let's join forces together and bring them together and do it the right way. I'm a huge proponent of this. And so I don't see it as much as I would like to. And when in my works with UC Irvine, I was pushing and it didn't have much success, unfortunately.
Well, there are lots of biases that play out in organizations, and older people.
An interesting one came up in the chat. So first of all, I want to, since we've got about 10 minutes left, I want to remind people, if they want to raise their hands, they can certainly ask the questions themselves. But one that came up that's really interesting, and Nicole, especially since you mostly work with technology-based companies, is what about bias based on age? And, I mean, obviously California's got some laws, but I don't know how much they're enforced. And, you know, how much does that come up, and does that get incorporated into?
So I was at first going to talk about DEI because it means a lot to different people. When I speak about it, I include the handicapped and age. In technology, and all of you who are sitting here on this call, and probably over, you know, if you're over 45 years old, which I am, you know, we all are at that point where you are starting to be concerned. If you get laid off, what is the probability if you're over 50 of getting rehired? And I'll tell you, you talk about bias, there's where you find it. There's where
if you think about organizations, they have the incentive to hire young people and for less than what they would pay for experienced people.
And what I tend to see, Al, is you know, Bill, before, you know, you send a resume in to this, a great candidate, I've vetted this candidate, perfect for your organization. Oh, too overqualified. Really?
That's the answer, the typical.
Too overqualified or too old?
How do you find that? I mean, that's really part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to be inclusive with everybody, whether ageism or sexism or racism is the deal.
Right.
But how do we deal with the economic pressure that maybe a company faces when it can?
Al, it's not an economic pressure. It's not.
What is it?
People hide behind that because a person, I see this day in and day out, say they're at $100,000, they'll take $150,000. They're senior level, they're great. They're going to pay someone else that same amount. It's not an economic issue. It's a culture issue.
Really? Okay.
That is what it is. And
it's also illegal too.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But again, you know, as we talk, frankly, in this conversation about, you know, really bringing people together and basing it around inclusion and skill sets, you know, as I've been in this industry and I see people who are more than qualified, and, you know, I see it happening every day. I see it happening, unfortunately, every day.
Well, that's clearly something we've got to find a way to get over.
Yeah, and it's
all of these isms are not good.
No,
and
I do think that I will say this for people that I've shared this many times because I know some of the people here on this call today, but I do think it behooves you to move around to different companies, not to stay in an organization over 10 years. Because what the excuse that is given to me is, oh, so-and-so was at this organization for 10 years. That used to be a good thing, but now it's not, because technology changes and emerges, marketing changes and emerges. And so if you're stuck in one organization, they don't think you have the enterprise experience and value to bring other thoughts and ideas to other organizations. And so I think it hinders you in your job.
That's really interesting. So the person that's trying to be included, we also need to be thinking about their career paths and how they have really advanced.
Yeah. And I Ben Hope on the call, and I know Ben, and I think we've talked about this before, but yeah.
Well, you may not know this, but I've been at UCLA.
And I'm a little bit more older than 40 though.
Well, you don't look it.
Heather, do you think before we run out of time, maybe we ought to see if there are any other questions? Let's engage the audience.
I think Jim has been raising his hand left and right here.
Yeah, I have, because this is a really important topic. And there's two things. One, I just want you to know, when my hair started turning gray, I felt it, and people pointed it out, and it's a microaggression when, in some sense. I never thought of it that way until you explained yours. What techniques, I posted something here, but what techniques do you have for people with resumes so they don't get disqualified right off the bat by having age indicators in their resume or in their paperwork.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, there's something that you could do there that maybe you get looked at based on your qualifications, not based on when your qualifications occurred.
Well, what I do think is there's a couple of tricks of the trade. When you have a resume, your front page of your resume, first of all, I like to call it a marketing piece, right? You're the advertising agency, and this is your marketing piece. And often enough times, I think people really go awry with what they should be putting in there and what they shouldn't. The first top part of your one-page resume, on the first page, I think it should be 2 pages, by the way, if at the senior level at minimum. You know, and the first part, if you were to fold it over, right, that first half, if you look at your marketing piece, your CV, should be based upon your most relevant experience to the job that you're going for. And I don't believe in, you know, you can put your, you know, you graduated from X, Y, and Z school or the BA. It's really not relevant, the years that you need to put it on there, because that's an immediate disqualifier for you. I think you cut your resume down, and again, you present yourself as a diverse candidate. You get in that interview and you're one of those 3, right? Because I think age is right in here, and you show them your strength. And so I would say that I just gave a speech on this actually a couple of weeks ago, just about your resume and your network and how to properly network and to use your network to get you in the door. And, you know, your resume, if you're applying into these CIO jobs on a automated tool, or first of all, ask yourself, you know, do you really want to be at a company that posts those like that? Or do you want to be referred in? Or do you want to have a recruiter come in and intro you? You know, it's an important position. They're just letting their HR do that. So that's a warning sign for me. And then secondly, those positions, you put your resume in, and if you don't have the keywords, there are algorithms that are looking for it. So the reason why you don't hear a lot back from perhaps some of those organizations, or most, is because you don't have the wording from the job description exactly in your resume. And so the algorithm rules you out and kicks you out.
So take it the other way real quick. Now take it from someone who's entering the workforce and how they get noticed, you know, because you said something very important earlier, that this is a business strategy, and with the changing demographics of the workforce and the competition for skilled labor in terms of having the ability to learn and do, not necessarily having the experience. How does one approach that when you're coming in the entryway? What would you recommend so that they don't get disqualified by too little experience?
Well, and I think this, where it comes to my point, Al, I'm going to say this to you, and from the university system and Davida at UCLA, and this is where, you know, the university plays a big part in the partnerships with organizations. I know JPL does a great job at this, and you are integrating these young students into your organizations early so they can pick up skills. So when they get to the level of, okay, they've graduated and now they're going into the workforce, they have some concrete background and skills that are applicable to have been working in a corporate environment for the last 4 years. And that's the number one thing that's missing today. And when you go and you, like Rafi and I were having a conversation right before this call, and he said, God, I've got some great people, you know, not real work experience, but they're talented. There's this, I said, okay, you know, send them and let me see what I can do. You need someone on a network to leverage and to refer those people in, because it's really, really difficult in there. And then there are other ways to get in, like different boot camps, and that they're going in and they're doing pro bono work and those types of things as well. But I know we don't have a lot of time, but I have a lot of thoughts around it.
Very good. You know, the notion of internships is critical for younger people. They need to get work-ready skills, is not just book knowledge. Experiential learning is a big part of what we try to do with our MBA students and folks in the undergraduate. As you know, we haven't said much about entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurial organizations. But I imagine you would say that perhaps an entrepreneur who's starting an organization should be aware of these things. And maybe that's the time to really start shaping the culture. And you just don't let it grow up around you in the hubbub of trying to get your business going. You don't, but you ought to pay attention to this. Would that be a fair conclusion?
More than fair.
Good, good, good. How are we doing on questions out there?
Anyone else have a question?
I had just one comment. You know, one of the things that needs to be highlighted, especially at the college level, you know, my kids, they got the benefit of me. So I was drilling them from high school, internships and good experience and focus, dedication, etc. And it's amazing. I ran into my son's tennis partner from high school at the gym, and he made a comment to me and he said, yeah, I can't find a job. I didn't know I had to get internships. He was a first-gen college student. He didn't have a parent who had gone to college. He didn't have a parent that worked in a business environment. They were laborers. And that's really where we need to, if we want to change some of the dynamics here, we have to start reaching out more into those communities. And it's really simple. It's telling them what they you know, because they're not getting it from their, you know, they're not getting from their high school guidance counselors. They're not getting it really from the career centers enough, or they don't know to go to the career centers. One or the other.
Know, right.
Yeah, but at some point, these very talented, I'm sure Rafi has these very talented people, didn't know I need to be doing this starting when I'm a freshman, not
Right.
you know, the 6 months before I graduate from college. And so
Right.
that's really where I think the message may be getting lost, is especially on the first gen college students that are just, they don't know what the rules of the road are. And then they don't position themselves well enough.
I agree 100%, Ben. You're spot on. Spot on. And that really needs to be coming at the high school level.
Yeah, it's, well, you know, if we really wanted to get a little closer, Nicole, I mean, the science tells us that most of what happens to folks, the trajectory they're on, is set by the time they're 6. So there's a whole issue here of how you raise children and parents and so on that can get kids developing the social skills to be. But if you don't know what you don't know because the parents didn't have the benefit of knowing these things, somebody has to help. And you know, that's where I think after school programs are so important, that enrichment programs for young people, so that they can begin to know what is necessary at some level to be effective in life, whether it's literacy, not just for the issues we're talking about today, but folks need to be literate about a lot of things: financial literacy, health literacy, social literacy, just being able to survive literacy. And it's overwhelming if you are, you know, sort of don't have a framework in which to deal with all of these things. Now, we've been talking about corporations today and the need for organization leaders to play a role in making this happen. But clearly, professional development is much broader than just what we know and that you have been able to do in innovating inside a organization. But it's society's issues to create a culture of belonging and inclusion, that everybody has a shot for opportunity and they can learn it. And we need to be receptive to it, because it's what helps folks acquire the things that are necessary to have the equality that we're looking for, that comes from the diversity, and be able to share then in what it is to, you know, to be on the ladder in this country. And I think what we've been talking about here is goes beyond the workplace. It goes to how we interact with a lot of people from different backgrounds and experiences, and try to make it such that they can belong. And I think you have you have helped us really think through what it takes to be innovative. It's not easy, we know it. But when you think about it, when you break it down the way you did, it appears simple, but I know it's hard. But here are the 5 or 6 things that you have to do.
It gets you started. It gets
you were kind enough to tell us about that. And I know there's a lot that lies behind the curtain that's necessary to make things go. But this has been a very instructive session.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I want to thank you,
Thank you.
For your contribution to this series.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate it.
So Heather, let me kick it back to you.
That was a great closing, Al, and I think an optimistic ending. So I like that. You know, there's a lot to do, but I think we can all, you know, make changes in our organizations, and you know, even like you said, even in some of our maybe charitable outreach. Just want to give a highlight for our upcoming events. We've got a happy hour on October 8th, and we're doing a tribute to Dawn Olander, who is our stepped down as executive chair now that Jim Rinaldi is doing it. And then on November 12th, we've got our Executive Leadership Awards, and our keynote speaker is Anderson alum Guy Kawasaki, which should be absolutely fascinating. He's a really interesting and impressive person. And so I hope that you all will come to both of these, and certainly for November 12th, it's completely open. So make sure everyone in your organization feels invited as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, everyone.